Hi, Dr. Hicks. I noticed that you gave us the option to make a video for this assignment on personal theology, religious education, and pedagogy. So I thought I would go ahead with a video for this one. And I wanted to start out just by talking a little bit about my own personal theology. It's really been developing over the last 30 years, I would say, as a result of my Eastern religious practices. I wasn't allowed as a child to really delve into religion, and my parents did not think that the Christian religion or anything or the church was a good place for me. So I wasn't really allowed to develop and form as an early child. So that kind of happened later in my adulthood. Or I guess my young adulthood. So it started out really for me as kind of an academic pursuit. So I studied at different Eastern religions in graduate school, and I even wrote my dissertation on Zen Buddhism. And I was very intrigued by Zen Buddhism. And so then from that point forward, my love for Eastern practices kind of grew over the years. And then later I experienced this sort of dark night of a soul. And I wanted to move things sort of out of my head in the academic intellectual part into more of like the embodiment of faith, I guess you could call it. And I really needed a practice that would connect me to the universe, to connect me to something bigger. So I began going to a Zen Sangha, given my earlier academic interests. I thought that's where I would go ahead and start. And from that, I traveled forward to the Temple of Kriya Yoga in Chicago. And that is ultimately where I ended up taking a year-long meditation teacher training, and then entered the seminary. And after 3 years of work with the Temple of Kriya Yoga, I was ordained as Swami Kandalayananda. So my faith formation has really been shaped by these Eastern religious practices. So I became most involved in the section of the Hindu texts that are the yoga practices. And so in yoga, as you probably know, you're really yoking your earth life and your spiritual life together. So I see every moment as an opportunity to do this practice, right? Yoga for me doesn't just happen on a mat, but it happens in every moment of my life. And so for me, like our earth life is not separate from our spiritual life. So I think every moment is sacred and an opportunity to experience the sacred, whether that be washing the dishes, watching a movie with my kids, taking a faith formation class, doing a meditation, being outside in nature. Like everything is connected together and sacred for me. So I'm kind of like living in this sacred relationship to life. And so I feel like that means that in every moment, I'm creating theology with the others and really all of life, animals, plants, even rocks, right? So we're creating these moments together. And so I guess for that reason, I feel like everything should be treated with the utmost care. And I try to bring this sort of ethics of care into every moment of my life and in my relationships and the way that I treat things. And in the yamas and the niyamas, which is part of the 8 limbs of yoga, of course, there's this idea of non-harming. And so I feel like all of the other yamas fall into that idea of non-harm. Like for example, if you're practicing the art of non-stealing, right? Then stealing is seen as a form of harm. So it sort of all rose back into what's called ahimsa or non-harming for me, and that's the approach that I take to my life. And I feel like taking this approach or living in this way comes from a place of love. And that love does kind of create that structure for my life as I yoke together self and spirit. So consequently, I would say that every part of my life informs religious education. So every moment is a moment to learn and be in formation. And you can see this through the work that I've done as a teacher. I feel it's a sacred duty to share what I've learned with others. And so I've done so in a variety of ways. I've been a religious educator in an academic setting. I've taught global religions in a college setting. I've been an educator in like a Sangha setting in a yoga studio, teaching yoga asana practice, meditation practices, and giving Dharma talks. And I've also recently set up a website for my own yoga and wellness center called mindfuljourneys.biz. And I've also been a teacher in a UU setting. And I've taught like a variety of adult formation classes, like building your own theology. I've done meditation and yoga. I've done the Building Bridges curriculum for teens. And so that's kind of all the way that all of this fits together for me. And, is, I guess, the connection between my personal theology and my ideas on faith formation and religious education. So I liked your question here on the meaning of faith. And so for me, when I first thought about this meaning of faith, I thought about what it means to believe and practice the 8 limbs of yoga. These are kind of the teachings of my faith tradition, and I recognize them as useful to me in my own development and faith formation. And so I use these practices every day to grow in my meaning of faith. And I recognize that they're relative to me and others that find meaning in them. And I introduce these teachings to others so that they may find meaning in them. And I recognize that not everybody finds meaning in the same places, and that's okay. So just being able to share that and those ideas on faith and what gives meaning to my life, I find valuable. So I liked this question so much that I posted it on Facebook asking other people what faith meant to them. And I got a really interesting variety of responses. I took a screenshot, but you couldn't see all the responses. So I'll just quickly go over what some people said about what faith means to them. So Michael said, it's what you know to be true, regardless of any physical evidence. Monica said, it's the belief in something greater than yourself. Donna said, knowing that what we believe in, we will achieve. Knowing that what we believe in, we will achieve. Sarah said, faith to her was trusting within your heart, your head. Full thinking. And Nicole said that it allows for the releasing of responsibility to something else, which in return allows for the mind to move on to more constructive thought patterns. And then Mel posted a picture of what's going on right now in Israel and said, this is where faith leads. So giving us a different kind of idea on faith. And so I hope you enjoy, some of those ideas. And it was very fascinating to me to see how many different responses there were. And I found that valuable in my own formation as I continue to reflect on how other people think of faith. And I think it's important to ask your congregants, and then also, when you're doing work in pastoral care. So then this idea of pedagogy. So I guess a lot of my pedagogy is sort of developed over the years, according to, some of the teaching practices I've come across, but also like my religious practices. And what's important to me and what I enjoy is this kind of constructivist idea of like it being active instead of passive learning. So I'll often give, like in my classes, a short burst of information and then some kind of question for reflection and journaling. And I guess the courses, when I have the opportunity to do so, are set up somewhat similar to yours in that they use a lot of different things to engage the learner, whether that be art or music or play or reflection, small group work, and then coming back into a larger group. And I like the idea from, Piaget that learning is kind of this collective experience that learns and that occurs in a group. It's also kind of interdisciplinary for me. I like to synthesize ideas that come from all sources, and that also informs, like when I'm teaching at the UU Church in a religious education class, whether that be adults or children, is just making all these different resources available to them so that they can see what fits for them and synthesize information. I guess I'm kind of a liberationist also. I like to the learners choose topics. I like to be like a resource for students, give out the information, and then I like this idea of working collaboratively to discover new information. So that doesn't place me as like the teacher at the top of a hierarchy. Instead, I'm in there in formation with the other students, and this is something we're all doing together. We're all having this conversation and adding to this shared body of knowledge. I like what Parker Palmer says about the inner teacher and kind of bringing that out, and so I strive to do that when I'm teaching my courses, and I really feel like the learners have so much to offer and to teach me even, and we all teach each other. And then kind of bringing this back around to my ideas on personal theology. I think of teaching like a asana practice, like a yoga practice, right? We're going through the poses, but each student is different in their body and has access to the poses differently. Some students are less advanced, some are more advanced. So you have to give the students all of the modifications so they can find where they fit. And just being able to sort of give them all those resources so they can find where they fit and where they can learn and grow is an idea that really speaks to me as far as pedagogy and how I approach teaching. So I hope you've enjoyed this rather lengthy video, I guess, on my personal theology, faith formation, religious education, and pedagogy.